This is CBS.
Next on Heartland News at 10, some troops from Fort Campbell are on alert. They're being told they'll be going to Kuwait.
200 employees of Shawnee Development Council went without paychecks today, and some programs may pull out of the agency.
And happy birthday to a radio station that programs for the blind.
July 1992 going out on a very cool note.
Here's big news. The Cardinals were not shut out tonight.
Heartland's News is next.
Thank you for watching KFVS 12, the Heartland's News channel. Now, Heartland News at 10.
Good evening. The United States is sending a message to Baghdad.
And it's going to be delivered by several thousand American servicemen and women who are being sent to Kuwait. Some troops from Fort Campbell are among the forces that will go to Kuwait in what the Pentagon says is to show continuing U.S. resolve in the Gulf. Special operations forces out of Fort Campbell have been given orders to be prepared to move out. Other Army units on alert are mechanized and infantry units at Fort Hood, Texas. The Pentagon says the 2,400 Army troops being deployed are taking part in training exercises. In addition, Navy and Marine forces are expected to participate in a round of exercises with the Kuwaiti military this week. The Pentagon is calling this operation Intrinsic Action. Pentagon spokesman Pete Williams says he does not know how long the soldiers will remain in Kuwait. Earlier this week, the U.S. dispatched Patriot missile batteries to both Kuwait and Bahrain.
This may be a meltdown. Those were the words of the executive director of the Shawnee Development Council. At least 4 programs threaten to pull out of the agency because of its $300,000 deficit. The governing board tried to talk Head Start officials from Chicago out of withdrawing its $1.5 million.
There's no decision being made by Chicago to pull their funds, what have you. We got 2 or 3 other days to work everything out, and we believe we can work things out.
Well, sure, we're frustrated. This is the governing board, and we think that they should conduct themselves in a way that keep this agency going.
Funding for 3 of the agency's programs were so low today, 200 employees went home without paychecks. The board hopes to have a financial recovery plan in place by Monday. In the meantime, employees say they may sue the board for failing to pay their medical bills.
An Illinois Air National Guard F-16 jet fighter crashed near Springfield, Illinois today, killing the pilot. Investigators have not determined what caused the accident, which claimed the life of 32-year-old Captain Donald Leckrone of Springfield. The plane from the 183rd Tactical Fighter Group went down shortly after 4 a.m. in an isolated farm field just south of the city. The jet was one of 13 leaving from Springfield for a NATO exercise in Denmark.
It appears a broken fuel line is responsible for a fire that broke out on a TWA jetliner yesterday. Flames started shooting from the back of the plane as it rolled along the runway at New York's Kennedy Airport. There was reportedly fuel on the ground about 2,500 feet behind the spot where the burning jet stopped. Federal investigators are taking a close look at the charred plane today. Nearly 300 people were on board, all safely evacuated, but some suffered minor injuries.
President Bush appears ready to tackle the tough campaign trail made even tougher by disappointing economic reports and calls for him to quit the race. Even Republicans are taking shots at Mr. Bush, saying he needs to come out fighting now and not later. Kent Jarrell reports.
This week, the president has suffered through discouraging economic news, scattered calls that he should quit the race, and poll results showing him way behind in California, a Republican bastion and the state with the largest number of electoral votes.
Tax the rich, feed the poor, we don't want push no more.
The president says, hold on, the real hardball campaign is coming, but not just yet.
I've been going through a little javelin catching for about 10 months from the political opposition. And I cannot wait for our convention to roll up my sleeves and go after them and tell the American people what's really going on.
A new poll shows Californians feel Clinton Gore can do a better job running the country than Bush Quayle. Republicans have told the Bush campaign to get going or lose. A California Republican says the president should start using the C word, Clinton, now, not later.
Oh, I think he's going to have to mention Clinton by name, and he's going to have to take the gloves off, and he's going to have to talk about Gore's radical environmentalism. The president has been, let's put it this way, he's been gentlemanly with the opposition.
Republicans admit the party must regain its dominance on the economy and are hoping the polls will turn around.
This election is far from over with. The 1988 Bush voters need to be assuaged a little bit. They need to be convinced that this president is on their side and understands their concerns.
But will it be too late?
I don't think it will be too late.
The Bush campaign, looking for increased visibility, is taking to the airwaves. Starting next week, political ads will run primarily on local stations in states considered crucial to the president's re-election bid. Kent Jarrow for CBS News, Washington.
Missouri Senator John Danforth says he's not alarmed by President Bush's latest standing in the polls. The Republican believes there's plenty of time for Bush to rebound before the November election and says he thinks the president is, quote, in a fighting mood. Danforth claims in time Bush will successfully point out the differences between himself and opponent Bill Clinton. After months of activity, the Ross Perot campaign headquarters in Cape Girardeau is silent tonight. Workers spent today cleaning out the 8th Congressional District office on Kings Highway. Supporters say even though their man is out, they're not down.
Of course, there's a little disappointment, you know, with all of us, but in this type of thing, you know, anything can happen. We put our time in. Mr. Perot made the decision he did for his own reasons, you know, and like I said, it's going to be a funny year. Who knows what's going to come down the line, so.
Perot supporters say their work is not over. They'll be at the SEMO District Fair taking contributions. They plan to send the money to the IRS to help reduce the national debt.
Still to come on Heartland News, a one-of-a-kind radio station gives the blind and disabled something most of us take for granted.
That story is ahead on Heartland Health.
You're watching Heartland News at 10 with Mike Shane, Marianne Maloney, meteorologist Don McNeely, and sports director Randy Ray. Heartland News continues in a moment.
There is a birthday celebration in Carbondale this week.
The 9th birthday of a radio station that's the only one of its kind in the Heartland. And Doyle takes us to the studio where volunteers and donations make a real difference to the visually impaired and physically disabled.
This is by Theodore Roosevelt. The editorial, Future of Anna Center.
When Aaron Brooks reads the newspaper, he does it out loud and in front of a microphone. Aaron reads what his radio listeners cannot.
I'm married to a blind individual, and one thing he really enjoyed was being well informed. So we always started our day with me reading the newspaper to him.
And thus was the inspiration for the station Valerie Parrish eventually founded, the Southern Illinois Radio Service. Her husband, Rick, is executive director.
We read like newspapers and magazines and other information about disability issues. We also get the syndicated columnist. What's on sale? Someone who can't read the papers miss out on those kinds of things.
Volunteers become DJs in their spare time, stepping into the studio to tape programs, which are then picked up by special receivers like this one. Dorothy Dykema is a longtime listener.
I like the local news. You can get plenty of written and spoken material about national and even state events, but the local news is something that I always feel very remiss. I just, you know, often don't know what's going on in my own town.
Today's programming schedule for July 31st.
The station went on the air with just 31 receivers. Today, more than 3,500 listeners tune in.
I never could have dreamed 9 years ago that we would be serving 4 states. And we get calls from the listeners, and it's made such a tremendous difference in their lives. So it makes me feel that all the hard work that went into this was definitely worth it.
Supported by grants and donations, the service will continue expanding as money's available to provide listeners with receivers. In Carbondale, Ann Doyle reporting for Heartland Health.
Ann says people with other disabilities which make it difficult to handle a newspaper, book, or magazine also find the station to be a great service.
3 employees of a Heartland radio station are without jobs tonight. They were fired after picketing in front of KLID AM in Poplar Bluff today. The workers came to protest getting late paychecks, but the station's owner says the part-time workers were told some of their checks would be delayed.
besides being upsetting, it's a little asinine. I don't know really, like I say, why they didn't come and sit and talk with me. They're young folks with perhaps not a full thought of what they're doing right now.
The former employees say their checks were as much as 3 weeks late at times. Some plan to continue the picket.
Are you ready for the weekend?
I'm ready for the weekend, especially with the weather we're going to have.
Yeah, Brian's got a good one on tap for us. Actually kind of cool out there tonight.
A bit cool, but, oh, who's complaining?
Not I.